Hi, and welcome to A Couple of Average Joe show. I am Mike.
I am Joe.
And this is Compelled. So, following the money, Jimmy Cayne. That's a name that we had already brought up. From the fall of 76 to the spring of 81, Jimmy Cayne was a successful stockbroker, a partner close to Bear Stearns CEO Ace Greenberg, and a mentor to young Jeffrey Epstein, who introduced him to the trading profession. So he told him all the ways to cheat.
The ins and the outs.
According to an article titled The Rise and Fall of Jimmy Cayne by William Cohen, starting in 1993, Cayne spent 15 years as one of Wall Street's most powerful CEOs of what? Cayne spent 15 years as one of Wall Street's most powerful CEOs, taking its per share stock price from $16 to $172, and the first one to own a company stake worth more than $1 billion. I guess Bear Stearns? I mean, it would be really nice if you had fucking written in there taking Bear Stearns per share stock price that or something.
Yeah.
Because nobody fucking knows. Cayne was also blamed for the downfall of Bear Stearns that unfolded the major U.S. financial crisis of 2008. Lost most of his large personal fortune and was subsequently the only top man at Bear not offered a face-saving senior-level job at J.P. Morgan Chase when Chase acquired it for the fire sale price of $10 per share. During 40 years at the firm, Bear Stearns went from making its money with bread and butter businesses trading securities and acting as the back office for other Wall Street firms to a publicly traded financial supermarket that was increasingly inflating its balance sheet with exotic securities. Once a fiscally conservative brokerage, Bear had become a house of cards. They're going to fall like dominoes. Checkmate. Oh, God, I'm glad I got to use a Zap Brannigan quote.
There you go.
All right. Kiff, bring me my velour pants. Yes.
Sounded like Butthead.
I know. He goes like this. He goes, here they are. Years earlier, had you asked Cayne what he wanted to be when he grew up, he would have answered a bookie, as apparently he was enamored with the life of the gambler. An accomplished card player, Cayne was an indifferent student at Purdue University, spending more time playing sports or bridge at his fraternity house than studying. Like Epstein, he left college without obtaining a degree, saying, I don't read and absorb, I hear and absorb. And he undoubtedly schooled young Epstein in the romance of the high-risk gamble. So we're slowly finding out more and more about Epstein. He didn't have a fucking degree, yet was able to get a high fucking powered job without a degree.
So he learned how to become a mental recording device.
So far in our Epstein manipulation series, we have exonerated President Trump from any significant criminal involvement in part 1 and established Epstein as a narcissist with a blackmail modus operandi in part 2. Well, I haven't even gone through. This is part 3, Men and Money, from thebl.com. But Trump and Epstein were buddies. Again, I mean, you don't know everything your buddy's doing. We've already established that. I don't know what you do when you leave.
Yeah.
I don't know. Like, do you beat your kids? I don't know. Do you score heroin for hookers for free blowjobs? I don't know. Most likely not.
Yeah, but you
I don't know. Okay. So in this episode, we will examine some of the big bad money man in Epstein's life as we start to unravel where all his assets really came from up to about 1989. And this is kind of, I haven't heard anybody talk about this, and I think this is really interesting. In a 2009 article titled 25 People to Blame for the Financial Crisis, The Good Intentions, Bad Managers, and Greed Behind the Meltdown, Time magazine reported that while plenty of CEOs screwed up on Wall Street, none seemed more asleep at the switch than Bear Stearns Jimmy Cayne. He had left the office by helicopter for 3.5-day golf weekends, was regularly out of town at bridge tournaments, and reportedly smoked pot. What does that have to do with this?
Because it's
conservative bullshit.
It's part of the stigma.
It's conservative propaganda that smoking pot makes you a bad person. I got the evil weed.
The devil's lettuce.
Why are you smoking the marijuanas? Back at the office, Cayne's subordinates bet the farm on risky home loans as 2 of his highly leveraged hedge funds collapsed in 2007. That was only the beginning, as Bear held nearly $40 billion in mortgage bonds that were essentially worthless. Cayne later told Fortune, I didn't stop. I didn't rein in the leverage. Well, selling it to European hedge fund managers as well doesn't fucking help when you're faking financial information about people that are making $1,200 a month and buying $1 million homes.
Yeah.
In 2010, Kirkus' book review of The Rise and Fall of Bear Stearns, author and former chairman Ace Greenberg, with a reputation for being conservative and earning profit by moderate risk-taking, surrendered primary responsibility for the company's operations to Cayne. He describes Cayne as mean, self-centered, and untruthful. He suggests that if Cayne had paid more attention to business in general and to Greenberg's moderate advice in particular, Bear Stearns may have survived. Cayne said conspiracies and rumors the firm came under attack. All part of a picture of a big fat goose walking down a lane that's about to get eaten up alive. I heard the same rumor, innuendo, market rumor. Those rumors, I'm not going to use the word conspiracy. Regardless of whether there's a conspiracy or not, conspiracy. Okay, I'm not an expert on conspiracy. That's his quote. Did you understand anything that he said there? Big fat goose walking down a lane that's about to get eaten alive. I understood that. Financial.
Yeah, so why mention conspiracy if you don't know anything about it?
Yeah. Financial Crisis Inquiry Commission Chairman Phil Angelides said, "Did they attempt to find one to your knowledge?" Cayne said, "To my knowledge, no. Concerns were unfounded." Were they at the time unfounded? And my answer is, yeah, at the time they were unfounded. Again, I'm reading through this thing called the BL, and we get to Bloomberg, who is questioning Cayne, I guess, and Al Hunt, who is questioning Cayne and talking about what's going on in the 2008 financial crisis. And then you have, however, in many ways, the extreme greed, selfishness, and dishonesty of Epstein, Cayne, and others revealed during the financial crisis of 2008 resulted from a widespread degeneration of American value where the seeds and characteristics of communism planted in the 50s and blossoming in the 60s were glorified in the 70s. The public school money and the American education industry in general expelled God and morality, dumbed down the...
It's like he's writing a book.
How many of us, including these Wall Street guys, receive the same twisting lessons on capitalism gone wrong, especially in blockbusters like The Sting, released in 1973, and then he goes on to talk about The Sting in 1973. Following the murder of a mutual friend, aspiring criminal con man, handsome scumbag Johnny Hooker teams up with old pro criminal scumbag Henry Gondruff to be extremely glorified to a young American. Okay, so what? What does that have to do with Epstein? Look, it's still going on about The Sting. Like he wrote a fucking movie review. According to Vicky Ward of Vanity Fair, within 2 years, while failing to behave like an acceptable teacher, Epstein successfully finagles his way into the good graces of Bear Stearns chairman Ace Greenberg via tutoring his son in math and being nice to his daughter.
Ooh.
In 1976, the brand new investment trader Epstein is introduced to the business by his mentor Jimmy Cayne and remained loosely associated with him even after the SEC raided Bear Stearns for suspected fraudulent insider trading in 1981 and questioned Epstein directly about Cayne. Epstein abruptly resigns the next day, but still received a $100,000 bonus that year. Was that hush money for keeping quiet about trading violations at the Bear? And was it possible that Epstein had already made other money that way? Hard to say for sure, but neither Epstein nor anyone at the firm was charged with insider trading. In a 2008 article titled The Importance of Implementing an Effective Insider Trading Policy, Donnelly wrote that the recent surge of insider trading investigations and civil and criminal enforcement actions involving Wall Street professionals is a reminder of the importance of broker deals and investment advisors. Okay, what does that have to do with Epstein? That he had accumulated much wealth at this point in 81. Epstein was so thorough at covering his tracks that he even managed to have Vanity Fair retract some of his answers to those SEC questions almost 25 years later. According to The Intelligencer, Graydon Carter, the former editor, was still in Epstein's little black book when he died. He was the editor who, after an office visit from Epstein, also killed other portions of Vicky Ward's story that it contained early accusations of pedophilia. When questioned recently, Carter said, "There wasn't enough on-the-record sourcing. I didn't invent the system. I lived by the system." Could that have been more fully developed nefarious manipulation system of Jeffrey Epstein? According to Vicky Ward, Cayne and Epstein were both prone to lying. Cayne said Epstein left Bear Stearns. It was never suggested that he leave by any member of management, and management never looked into any improprieties by him. This contradicted Epstein's SEC testimony given on April 1st, 1981, where he claimed that he had found offensive the way Bear Stearns management had handled the disciplinary action following its discovery that he had committed some improper expense reporting and a possible Reg D violation. Evidently, he was in too much of a hurry and improperly got a friend involved in a deal by lending him $20,000 to buy stock, and the related company disciplinary action resulted in a $2,500 fine and destroyed Epstein's shot at achieving partner that year. Soon afterwards, Epstein was operating as International Assets Group, a consulting company out of his apartment on the Upper East Side, and was likely furthering his higher education and other aspects of the successful con job. While he claimed that he managed money for billionaires only, this exaggeration was more likely a bold cover, which explains why his money-making was typically cloaked in mystery, made him sound more wealthy than he was, and maybe even helped him attract a billionaire. Anyway, he contradicted this claim in 1989, where he testified that he spent 80% of his time assisting people recover stolen money from fraudulent brokers and lawyers. Towers Financial. He was also not above entering into risky tax-sheltered oil and gas deals with much smaller investors. Was he schooling himself in other fraud for the benefit of investors or possibly ripping them off? Documents show that Michael Stroll, the former head of Williams Electronics, filed a lawsuit against Epstein and lost. Oh, I didn't know that. That's cool. In 1982, IAG received an investment from Stroll of $450,000, which Epstein supposedly put into oil. Stroll tried to recover his money, arguing that Epstein violated their contract of '84. Stroll claimed that Epstein had promised to pay him $75,000 in 1988 and that he did pay him, but only $10,000. Epstein claimed without evidence that the $10,000 was not any return on Stroll's initial investment, but instead payment for a horse. So the investor lost $450,000 and was therefore paid nothing over the course of 6 years. So where did the money go? Did Epstein lose the money in some legitimate investment, or did he successfully defraud Stroll and stash it in some offshore bank account? By 1988, Epstein already had some experience with SEC trading violations, exaggerating his business, and somehow convincing an unhappy investor to refrain from taking him to court for at least 5 years. And he was working for the charismatic, audacious, and criminal CEO of Towers Financial, Steve Hoffenberg, who also said that Epstein was great at moving money illegally. Stroll said he could never get a straight line from Epstein. Everybody who's his friend thinks he's so darn brilliant because he's darn wealthy. I never saw any brilliance. I never saw him work. Anybody I know that is that wealthy works 26 hours a day. This guy plays 26 hours a day. Was he just mad about his $450,000 loss, observing the con man spending some of the loot, or had Jeffrey Epstein figured out some real economic game changer? Vicky Ward reported with certainty that the years after Epstein left Bear were not prosperous until 1987, when he landed a job with Hoffenberg and his tower collection agency. Hoffenberg used the company's funds to pay off early investors, Ponzi scheme, etc., etc., etc. And it also helped to service a lavish lifestyle that included a mansion on Long Island, homes in Florida, Manhattan, Sutton Place, as well as a fleet of cars and planes. Now that sounds like a role model of real interest to Jeffrey Epstein, who said he was introduced to Hoffenberg by the notorious John Mitchell of the Nixon administration. Wow. See? Just going down this fucking rabbit hole, bro.
Yeah.
Just going down the goddamn rabbit hole every time we fucking do something. This is kind of cool. According to Intelligencer, Hoffenberg claims he was introduced to Epstein by Douglas Lessey, a mysterious British arms dealer. Oh, here we go. Oh, who else was an arms dealer? Khashoggi.
Yes.
When did Khashoggi hit the rise of his financial might and power? In the 80s.
Birds of a feather.
And that he paid Epstein $25,000 a month as Tower began making risky plays to take over companies like Pan American and Emory Air Freight. Tower advisors on the Pan Am deal included John Mitchell, Nixon's brother Edward, and John Lehman, former Secretary of the Navy. Hoffenberg claimed in the 93 hearing before a grand jury in Illinois that Epstein came up with the idea of financing these bids through Tower's acquisition. Great, Mike. Acquisition of two Illinois insurance companies, Assisted Life and United Fire.
Associated Life.
Assisted Life, too. Thank you. Anyone remember Nixon's top cop and re-election chairman, John Mitchell? According to Wikipedia, in the days immediately after the Watergate break-in, Mitchell enlisted former FBI agent Steve King to prevent his wife Martha!
Why did you say that name?
From learning about the break-in or contacting reporters. While she was on a phone call with journalist Helen Thomas about the break-in, King pulled the phone cord from the wall. Mrs. Mitchell was subsequently held against her will in a California hotel room and forcefully sedated by a psychiatrist after a physical struggle with 5 men that left her needing stitches. Nixon aides, in an effort to discredit her, told the press that she had a drinking problem. Now we're going to see rabbit hole. Nixon was later to tell interviewer David Frost that Martha was a distraction to John Mitchell, such that no one was minding the store, and if it hadn't been for Martha, there'd have been no Watergate.
If the president does it, it is not illegal.
I don't care about the Watergate scandal. Now imagine what Jeffrey Epstein discussed with Mitchell during conversations right up to Mitchell's death in November of 1988. The next month, the Lockerbie bombing of Pan Am essentially killed the Tower deal to buy Pan Am. While it's possible that Epstein was neither yet involved with the pedophile blackmail or his playing 26 hours a day was actually him developing it, he apparently still felt driven to participate in further illicit activity with Hoffenberg. According to court documents filed in 2018, during 1987 to about 93, Hoffenberg and company were extremely busy with extensive criminal activity related to the Ponzi scheme, like selling fraudulent securities, tax evasion, obstructing justice, where his gang, including until now the unnamed co-conspirator, robbed 200,000 investors of $475 million until about 93 when he was sued in a connected class action lawsuit and declared bankruptcy. 94, he was arrested. 95, pleaded guilty to 5 criminal counts. In 95, he pleaded guilty to 5 criminal counts. In 97, he was convicted and sentenced to 20 years with $1 million fine in order to pay back $463 million in restitution. According to Terrence Corrigan in 2019, there was 2,800 investors in the scam, and Epstein was sort of a senior vice president. If he was not the number 1 guy, he was certainly the number 2 or number 3 person. I know we saw organization charts, and yes, Epstein's name was on them. Corrigan likened Tower's business model to the classic con movie, The Sting. Again, bringing that up.
Kind of reminds me of the Boiler Room.
He described an operation where Hoffenberg and other executives would woo investors in a Manhattan wood-paneled boardroom before giving tours of operating floors 1 floor below. Someone would call downstairs to make sure employees would look busy once investors arrived. It was pure Ponzi. The company had different lines of business. It was selling promises to investors, buy our notes, buy our bonds, and never had a core operating business that would have sustained the kind of payoffs that were being promised. Corrigan's team did not pursue a financial claim against Epstein. He turned the product of his investigations over to the SEC, which brought its own charges against Tower executives, but that did not include Epstein. And somehow, like magic, in spite of thousands of unhappy investment victims, Epstein walked away from all this criminal activity without even being accused. Epstein had somehow discovered an immunity from prosecution that had to be rooted in the federal government because it worked in multiple states. This is a long one. So we're going to end this one here.
The BL part 3. Well, part 3,
well,
point 1.
Yeah.
3.1.
Our part 2, BL part 2, part 3 for later, part 1.
I think we need that little code symbol.
Yeah. Jesus.